So Ozwald, thank you for being here, and thank you for allowing me to make you supremely uncomfortable.
Good.
Which I'll endeavor to. And
yes,
then I will, of course, open
that.
after about 3 questions, I will open the session open to Q&As, which I know everyone wants to ask a question.
Of course.
So you are known, has been described to me, as the ultimate man of savoir-faire, suave and witty. So what I want to know is, when was the last time you are just left absolutely gobsmacked, flat-footed, and just did not have a retort or a response to a situation?
Like right now, yes. I'm always flat-footed.
No.
My daughter does it to me regularly, actually.
Very well.
She said to me, okay, so Dad, you're going to do this talk, right? And I said, yeah. So what are you going to talk about? So before I do it, I'll just talk about my film. Says, I was actually going to say I wasn't prepared. And my daughter said, Dad, you can't tell them now. These are really very intelligent people. You're going to embarrass yourself. You're saying back. I said, well, look, what I'll do is I'll just be pretty frank and honest about how it all works, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the bottom line is I'm very passionate about Africa, and African development. So the whole point is why I made the film was hopefully inspire watchers. So the idea is to remind Africans their responsibility, be it politicians, because I studied a lot of political figures in Africa, and also reminded the diaspora, their kind of responsibility in development. And also I put the point of the African American in there as well, because I think African Americans have a big role to play as well. So that all these things within the film have been placed there for a purpose, and also for someone who kind of talks about Africa in terms of poverty, and obviously over time the kind of story and marketing of Africa has kind of been clouded, because every time I talk to anyone about African investment, they always tell me about risk. Mm-hmm. All right, and so it's very annoying, which is why I brought up that piece in the movie from 1957, Humphrey Bogart. Mm-hmm. I mean, back then there was no doubt about the wealth, right, and the opportunity. So I wanted to reinforce that point. So that's something that's been forgotten. So when everyone talks about what's going on, how it happened, it's like, well, hang on. We all know what the opportunity is. So hopefully that's what I made the film.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask a little bit first about what was your first love, or just is your first love?
Oh wow,
fashion. I want to know what effect on British fashion do you think? We have a gentleman called Mr. Enfield, Mr. Enfield, Edward Enfield, who has become the first editor of Vogue. And someone that is a fellow Ghanaian and someone who you call friend.
Yes, I know very well. And funny enough, we're born on the same day. Can you imagine?
Oh, wow. What effect do you think that will have on British fashion, have a man and an African leading a premier fashion magazine?
I think just the seat alone has already had a huge effect. In particular, maybe you would have thought in America it would have happened before happened here in the UK, but it's a great thing. I've known him a very long time. I think how I feel about it, I think it's great. What effect it's going to have is going to be really down to what he does with it. Mm-hmm. But he's experienced, and so he'll just do a great job. Mm-hmm. Now, does it mean he's going to suddenly put 8% black people in the magazine? Probably not, but I'm sure he'll make the point that the UK is a multicultural site, so I'm sure that'll be reflected in the magazine. How does that mean on the greater effect? Let's say in Europe, it's a huge thing. Definitely French Vogue, which is now a powerful magazine, will definitely, depending how he mobilizes it, will have quite a huge effect on fashion and trends. Now, is he suddenly going to use Africa as a reference in all his work? Probably, but I don't think that'll be the cornerstone of his messaging. Mm-hmm. But he's been based in America a long time, because in fact, he wasn't recognized for his talents in the UK, so he had to go to America. And it's a really funny thing. I mean, funny enough, Syl said this to me many years ago. He said, Syl the singer, I hope you know him. Yeah. He says to me, he goes, when you start getting relatively successful in the UK, you need to go to America. And if you win America, then you can come back. Because if you stay here, it's the way that the system kind of wears you down. So it's kind of, I have to say it's quite true.
And you have quite a lot of, your brand has quite a lot of traction in Hollywood.
Yes.
And so has that translated into the US Main Street? And did you dress President Obama? That's what
Yeah, so I made some pieces for him. Actually, when he came to Ghana, and I presented him as a gift. Obviously, we've had a lot of talk since. And funny enough, a client of mine, his name's Robert Smith, he's a big entrepreneur in America. Actually, he's asked me to make a suit for Obama, so
been there, done that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's talk a little bit about what we are discussing here today, which is the continent. And it looks like to me that you, over the years, you have started two fundamental vehicles.
Yes.
One was a for-profit vehicle made in Africa, and one was a
foundation.
And a foundation.
Yeah.
I want to know what kind of feasibility studies you've been looking at. What kind of projects for the for-profit as well that you've engaged in. I'd also like to address some reports that the fund has been discontinued, that's no longer registered.
Sure.
So yeah.
Right, so I think in a nutshell of it is, I started Made in Africa probably 12, 13 years ago. And none of it is, I was very happy designing my clothes and doing my business and really didn't have to really bother myself too much about what was happening in the continent. And a friend of mine kept on telling me that, you're quite known in Africa, you should do something. And my father was always quite, made me very responsible how I could have an impact. And in fact, I remember I was in Ghana, I can't remember the year, I got in front of the president of Ghana, and I put an idea to him.
Who was it, Mohammed?
No, it was Mohammed. It was Crowe. It's a long time ago, and it was actually just when he became president. And so I'm sitting in front of him, and I pitch him an idea, right? Now the thing is, when you're creative, I've always been creative. I've made my living by being creative, so I'm very creative in my thought process. So I had an idea that if you could take a city and float it on the stock market, what kind of value would that be?
Okay.
Right? So I had that from a very young age. So I said, listen, you're going to Ghana, the big issue is capital, right? So why don't we look outside the box? Why don't we rethink the opportunities? So I'm saying this to him in a room. And so he sort of says to me, sounds interesting, okay. So I'm like, whoa, I'm not quite ready for that yet. Like, what do you mean, we're gonna do this, So I recognized in that moment that I could get the platform to speak. And so then I came back from London from that experience, and I said, look, how am I gonna bring the resources I have, the relationships I have, and have an effect on the continent? I met a friend who happens to be a prince in Uganda, and he, with that kind of responsibility of being a prince, we kind of discussed what we could do, and then I kind of said, well, look, if I'm going to do anything in Africa, it's going to have big impact, So then we looked at all the different industries, agriculture, power. We looked at all the things that were causing issue. And then I thought, how am I going to affect this? And I kind of worked out the biggest issue was the marketing.
Okay.
So I started my business, let's say in the 80s, right? And I identified that if I opened up a store in Savile Row, I could make traditional tailoring fashionable globally, right? And so,
and I heard you had some success with that.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens is, I thought what I'd do is, and then also again in the 80s, and I grew up in the 70s. During this period, it was obviously not difficult. It was difficult, being black, right? So I knew that not only that I could affect a traditional skill by being there, but also I could have a cultural influence, right? So that I came to that conclusion. So let's say this is kind of early 80s, 84, 85, and by let's say 89, 90, I was building this reputation as a designer/tailor. And so I realized the most powerful, already back then, I recognized a tool. So I had a friend who was a writer, and I said to him, what I need to do is I want to go to all the top magazines and basically say to them, oh, what's this talked about this new breed of tailor, right? And of course, it didn't exist. We created it. I knew a few people kind of had a certain creative slant. And so what happened was he went out, went all the top magazines. They didn't want to be embarrassed of not knowing what this movement was. And so what happened was the movement was created. And of course, when they went to interview these individuals, of course everyone wants to be part of something that's new, right? But because I knew the story, when they came to me, I could embellish the story. So that's what kind of helped create the trend, right? And that trend eventually led me to open my store on Savile Row. So I knew that form of marketing. And I knew that if I could apply that same rule to content, it would be the same thing. So again, so Made in Africa really, in truth, was a marketing vehicle to communicate change for the continent. And it was quite amazing because, you know, I know Bono personally, I know Bob Geldof personally, and already I started talking to them in the 90s and said, look, you know, we need to change this narrative around the continent of food dropping out of airplanes, and, you know, we need to change this whole poverty perspective. And it was really difficult. Didn't want to listen to me, you know, it was tough, but I knew from my experience of how I built my brand that you've got to be quite consistent in it, in your communication. And I had access. So, you know, I knew Tony Blair personally, and then later on I got to know Gordon Brown, and I was sitting with him like this, and I sort of said to him, you know, Africa's really rich, you know, all these resources in the ground, and I mean, you just have to look at the opportunities of what made Britain great before. Why don't we just build a consultant business and go and build out the infrastructure? So, you know, and I'm a designer telling him this, you know, I'm not an economist, and it seemed really logical. Suddenly he's going, actually, it makes sense. But then I wanted to say to him, I'd say to everybody.
And you know what happened since then. Almost all these guys that you mentioned have since created funds and gone into Africa.
That's exactly correct. Exactly. And by the way, and that.
So you listen to your tailor then.
Yes. And I there's no question I had a big influence in that, because you know, I mean, just look at the way I approached the film. You see. So, you know, I'm sitting in front of many leaders across the continent, and I'd say, listen, you know, what's the problem? And a lot of time when they get the power, it's so rigged with so many issues that they can't even think beyond the immediate issue, plus the ministers they got in charge who don't have the right infrastructure on. So it's basically one problem after another. So when you go in there with a kind of clear strategy that says it gets them from A to Z, and they don't have to think about it, and you pull the piece, then they're ready to do the deal. That also includes the financing, by the way. So that became clear to me that was the problem, the packaging.
I'm so sorry as well. I just want to open it up to one or two questions so that we give the audience a chance to speak. We're running short of time, but that was fascinating. And could we get a microphone for a gentleman here, a gentleman there? And do we have a lady? Do we have a lady? There, excellent, behind there. Okay, so you can catch that. I can even walk around with it if I need to. All right, so the lady up front, a gentleman here, a gentleman there. Yeah. The lady up front. Let's do her first, and then. Okay.
Hi, my name's Phoebe. I just wanted to ask you, there's a lot of immense creative capital and cultural capital in Africa. How do you integrate it into strategies of growth that will drive the continent forward? I mean, we have a lot of piracy issues and you know, a lot of intellectual property theft and stuff. But besides that, we're very, very creative people, very well dressed, great style, colourful.
I think actually, it's interesting that because when we started Made in Africa, we always looked at technology as as a way to communicate a lot of messages, but I think maybe we're a bit early on that. I think now, I think technology is the key. It is, I think in terms of creative, even let's say for myself, if I was interested to access creative talent for whatever, the question is where do you go to find them? So I think I've been thinking about such a platform where you have a platform where a lot of creatives across every field, where there's a place where you can access. For example, we've got a new president in Ghana, right? And so he's got a whole series of issues of development that he's got to deal with. But you've got this huge diaspora of Ghanaians around the world, right? Who gladly support and help him through that. But how does he access that? And so a lot of the time they just don't know who to find, you see. Now he's quite good with this, so he's trying to recruit as many creative people around him as possible, like David Ajay, for example, to help him on planning of and development, for example, and me and myself around textiles. So I'm just saying that for me is one of the big issues of the continent, is tapping into that resource of knowledge. And I think technology is the key for that.
Excellent. The gentleman?
Thank you. I'll start by saying I'm a huge fan.
Oh, thank you. That's a good start.
The things I don't have as many, probably Ozwald Boateng in my wardrobe is more economics than aesthetics. But I've got a question. In your business, obviously, it's all about image, right?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, in the relationship you have with the diaspora, the African community, do you have any comments on that? Because that seems to be something that's changed over time and seems to be one that has not been as strong as I would say, as it could have been.
What's the question?
Yeah, I don't understand. Yeah.
Looking at the perception of the relationship you have with the African community and the African diaspora community over the course of your career.
Oh,
if you
when I was
comment to that, yeah.
Well, okay, so it's really simple on that actually.
Yeah.
So let's say I started in the early 80s, and in fact, when all the way through the 80s, and as I started building my name, up until the early 90s, I didn't have anyone take pictures. And I let my clothes do the talking, and the main reason for that is I didn't want to be pigeonholed, for one. Two, I was taking a very traditional skill and I was making it very modern, and that was its own revolution unto itself. And more importantly, I started very young. I mean, I was 16, 17 when I started. So I needed to create a bit of a perception around myself, so no one actually knew how old I was, So, I mean, because what I was trying to change was significant. And so, during that period, that was the idea. Then through the 90s, when I started being photographed and I became more visual, and in truth, I found it challenging, actually, because I got a lot of press focused on me as an individual, even to some extent more than my work, because the work was, I was good at what I did, and I was, creatively, I was having a big impact in fashion. And then after 2000 and now, the world started changing around me. I mean, I'll tell you something really funny. I got invited to the British Fashion Council. They do a dinner, right? And I was invited by Tiny Templar, right? Quite funny, right? It's me invited by Tiny Templar to a British Fashion Council dinner, but it's the truth. And I had not been to a dinner in like maybe, I don't know how many years, 7 years, I don't know how, a long time. So I arrive in the room, I sit at his table, and I look around the room, and I'm in shock. I was shocked because I couldn't believe how many black people were in the room. I mean, it was mind-boggling. You gotta understand, when I started up until 7 years ago, or whatever it was, I was the only guy in the room. So it was quite a revelation for me, actually. And so it wasn't actually so surprising when Edward became the editor of Vogue, because it seemed that the trend had moved. So in terms of my communication, you know, with my brand and then diaspora, well, I've always been engaged, right? Virtually from the start, time I started. But as a strategy, I couldn't be overt with that. I couldn't be going, I'm an African origin designer and this is what I'm about. Because when you're trying to affect change, you got to do it in pieces and moves, small moves. And then when you find yourself in a position that you can be more overt and more output with it, then you do, which is basically why I'm sitting here today.
I'm going to have to cut this short, but I am so grateful for you coming here, Ozwald. And perhaps the young lady can ask the question directly to you as we start.